Welcome back to another week of Unlicensed. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Jill. I'm the host of Unlicensed, and this is the podcast where real women write in about anything that they want, and they get anonymous advice back from all of our different female guests, including relationship coaches, therapists, friends, family, and social media influencers every week. And I am so excited for today's episode. We are joined by Liberty Schultz. She is a digital content creator, most known for her 50 First Dates series, basically going on dates with different men, defeating these situationships that we will definitely dive into a little bit more because I know I struggle with those as well, and really just letting people into her personal dating life to get over the anxiety of going on dates and really look into what that looks like as well. So welcome, Liberty. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. This is going to be an absolute blast.
Dude, we're going to have a blast. As you guys know, we like to dive a little bit into our guests first before we get into the advice for today. So you were such an interesting person to me in the best way. I've been following your 50 Dates series before we even realized that we had like a mutual connection, really. My roommate works with Liberty, so that's how we got her on the show today, guys. But you've been blowing up, and I've seen you all over my FYP, so I'm like, we have to have her this season. She lives in Atlanta. I'm so pumped. So talk to us about why you really wanted to start this in the first place. I know a big part of it was situationships and getting into these, you know, non-committal relationships a bunch too, but talk to us about your first steps of that and actually starting the series too.
Yeah, for sure. So it started a little over a year ago, like last September, and I had gotten out of a tough situationship, as we all have been in, right?
Oh, yeah,
They're
girl.
the worst. Everybody has to go through them, right? To learn like the pitfalls of them and like what to watch out for. Everybody's got to go through them.
Yeah.
But I got out of a tough situationship with one of my close guy friends. And I lost hope that there were good guys out there. I was fed up. I was tired of dating culture and this like, we're going to hang out, but we're not going to date. We're not going to call this anything.
Yeah.
And I was fed up with that. And I was talking to a friend one day and I was like, I'm tired of these guys. And
gotta get out of here now.
And she was probably tired of hearing me vent, honestly. Like she was probably like, Lib, it's been a month. Like, shut up. And she looked at me and she was like, Lib, there are good guys out there. There's guys that want to date. She's now happily married and honestly like such a light in my life.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're right. I'm going to go find those guys. And then also it was kind of paired with being tired of dating culture of, you know, drinks and bowling. Like it gets boring, right? Boring dates are they're
bowling is
awful.
sending me. How many bowling dates have you been on?
Probably like 3 or 4.
Really?
I don't know. They're popular. Guys like them.
Okay, I've never been on a bowling date. To know. Yeah.
They're okay.
Okay.
They're
I
not
feel
my
like
favorite.
you can't really talk as much during them, I feel.
Right. It's awkward and you're having conversation. You got to go up there. You got to bowl.
Yeah.
Someone's always going to lose. It's usually the guy. I'm sorry.
Sorry, boys.
I'm a good bowler.
She's competitive. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it started kind of through that. And so I've been going on these dates with this scratch off date book.
Yeah.
So it has these wild kind of quirky date ideas in it. So pairing with finding good guys and wanting to make dating fun again, this whole idea was birthed.
I love it. And you mentioned your guy friend in the first situation. What is your preferred method of dating? And you can talk about this series or just like in your day-to-day life. Do you like meeting guys in person? Do you like a mutual friend setting you up with someone? Do you like going on the apps? Do you use a little bit of everything? I think really good advice I got last year was do whatever works best for you. I think you go on TikTok and you see people saying you need to be on this and this, and then you meet. But sometimes it's like dating apps will work for some people, but they won't work for other people. So what is your preferred method of meeting people? What do you like to do?
Most definitely. I feel like because of the nature of this series and I have to, find 50 people to go out with, I've tried kind of everything. I've done dating apps. I've done singles events. I've done mutual friends.
Wow.
I've done people I've met playing pickup soccer. So a lot of like different places. And I definitely prefer like having a mutual friend or some sort of like connection or some level of friendship or acquaintanceness before. Dating apps are kind of hard. It's hard to go from not knowing someone to being put like in a romantic setting where you're like on this date and you're trying to, and you're like, I'm trying to just get to know you at least as like a person.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to develop a crush on you at least. And I don't even have that when you're on a dating app.
No,
sure.
It is so hard with the apps. That's something I struggle with is I do like to have a level of, even if there's a physical attraction there, like I know that we have some banter already. I know that we get along. I know that your energy feels good to me to go on a date with. So dating apps is a bit hard because a lot of the time you can pick up on energy sometimes over messages, but you may not see that energy till you're actually in person. Another big thing is people saying, you need to build your roster with multiple men and just kind of, or women, and kind of keeping it up for that afterwards. Are you someone that's always believed that you should keep your options open? You should have a roster of people when you are ready to date? Or are you someone that's saying if you meet a really great connection, you can focus in on that and not feel guilt for not having other options and having all your eggs in multiple different baskets.
Yeah.
What do you prefer in terms of that?
Definitely. I feel like it's good once you have a connection with someone, honestly, to like keep pursuing it.
Yeah.
It's easy to be like, oh, I have all these options. Honestly, personally, I can't keep like more than 2 to 3 people straight.
Right.
So it's like, even if I have 2 guys, there's been many times, I don't know, when it rains, it pours. And during this like whole series I've been doing, it's always like been like 2 guys I really hit it off with at the same time.
Ooh.
And I'm kind of like, what do I do?
Yeah.
So I'll kind of like pace it out and continue going out and just feel it out.
Yeah.
But even that's like really hard for me. I'm like, I want to be all in on somebody, and it's tough. I don't know how people do a roster. Honestly, it's not for me. I would be mixing up names, mixing up jobs, mixing up stories.
You're like, oh, your mom's a nurse, and they're like, no,
my mom's an accountant.
Yeah, literally the complete opposite of what you said too. For the people that you felt very connected with during this time, and it does suck when you have like 2 crushes at once. Because like, who do I go for?
It's the worst.
Yeah, what do I do? What do you typically find your type to be within that? Do you have a pattern of men that you typically find yourself more attracted to and getting along better with? Are you someone throughout this series that your type has completely changed from what it used to be? What does that look like too? Because people always say that sometimes your type is more of a pattern, not necessarily the healthiest thing. I'm someone who definitely goes for the same type of man, and it's not the best type of man, hence me being single too, and that's my own shit to work out as well. What does that look like? Has your type changed throughout this process? Has it stayed the same? Have you learned more about yourself and what you value within relationships? It's changed more in terms of personality. What does that look like for you too?
Yeah, definitely, because I'm going on so many dates and I've had so many different avenues of meeting people. I've met and gone on dates with so many guys that are so different than what I thought my type was. Yeah. And it's been great because it's kind of opened my eyes to be like, oh, maybe I pair well with someone else. Before starting this series, honestly, I was really attracted to a guy that was exactly like me. And I liked the idea of that. I was like, oh, I want an extrovert who like is always doing things or like has the same hobbies as me. But I've learned that honestly, I kind of am more into someone that's a little bit different. Yeah, they have to like have their friends and be somewhat extroverted because I'm like 100% extroverted. Or they like have to, you know, like nature, be adventurous. And those are big things. But I'm kind of like into someone that's a little bit different, not exactly like me. Been there, done that. I've dated someone who's like me, and it was kind of scary. Yeah. It was terrifying.
What made it scary for you? Was it just that you felt like there wasn't a lot of room for growth because you guys were so similar that you're like, I have learned so much on my own. There's not really anything that I feel like someone very similar could teach me. Why did it feel uncomfortable for you in that situation?
Yeah, I think like the beauty of relationships is you guys are different and you complement each other. You each bring different things to the table, and you're like, I wouldn't have thought of it that way. And I think we would have the exact same thought process, or we'd want to do the exact same thing. And so we kind of, it almost caused not clashing, but just less room for growth, 100%. Because if you're different, you complement each other and you think of things differently. And even like with plans, it was great because we always wanted to do the same thing.
That's what her like, want to go hiking? Immediately.
No, yes. You want to go rock climbing? Yes.
I love that. I mean, I think that's very fair. I feel like I typically go for people that are very different than me. And then in the same sphere, we'll go for someone that's like so similar to me. And I find myself growing a lot more with someone who is so different. When you're meeting all of these people, all different personalities, everything, there obviously is a level of transparency that you have to have with your audience. You have to let them into a very private part of your life. Have you someone, and you mentioned you're extroverted, but in terms of your private life, have you been someone that's always been a little more private when it comes to dating? So this series has allowed you to open up and share your experiences with other people that are anxious about first dates, going on first dates, or have you always been open about your dating life and it was an easier choice for you to begin this series and then kind of share everything you've gone through with the world? What did that look like for you in terms of vulnerability?
Yeah, 100%. No, prior to doing this, I was very private about anything. Like, even like liking someone, I kept it highly, really close to my chest.
Y'all will never know.
Like no one's gonna know this. And I was so opposite of how I am now, honestly. And I would hold everything so close to my chest. And I think a lot of it came down, I've talked about this on my podcast a little bit before, how it came down to maybe like in high school, I look at the root of everything where people would get to become friends with me to like date my friends, right? And that was a replaying thing. And so as I got into like adulthood or in college, I would be like, oh, no guy's gonna like me. So it came from like this lack of confidence, I think, that I would hold everything close to my chest.
Yeah. That makes sense.
As I became more authentic and more vulnerable on social media and like growing up, you know, and like being like, oh no, like someone can actually like me, you know?
Yeah.
And that was a huge thing and a huge growth point, honestly, for me to realize like, no, I got this. I can go out with people and I can be vulnerable about it on the internet.
Yes. And they're going to like me for me, not because they're trying to get something out of me in that situation too. I think that's so important, that having a level of self-confidence within yourself is so important for dating, because it's so cliche, but I think you're never fully healed in so many ways. But if you really just cannot stand yourself and whatever that looks like, it is hard to let someone else into your life and begin a relationship with that too. And I think that's such an important thing that people learn as they're dating too. What's one thing that you've learned? Because obviously you have your podcast, It's a Date. You're talking about all of these crazy experiences that you're having, wonderful experiences as well. And also talking a little more about like the womanhood and femininity that can come within dating, which is so awesome. Yeah. What have you learned about yourself through these dates, through your different creative adventures too, with your social media, with your podcast? What's one thing that you've learned about yourself that you feel like you wouldn't have if you didn't begin this process?
So literally so much. This past I could name off 100 things. So much. I feel like one thing, the biggest thing I've learned is there are good guys out there that want to date, but you have to put yourself out there to meet them, right? Yeah. You can't just be sitting on your couch. You can't just like stay in your house and expect that to come for you. Yeah. You have to get out there and meet them. And prior to that, I was like meeting people just as like friends, as buddies. And I wasn't ever like pursuing things romantically or, you know, leaning into that side of femininity and dating, you know? Yeah. And I feel like that's a huge thing I learned. There's good guys out there, but you got to meet them. You got to try to get out there and do things. Yeah. I've also learned about like keeping your standards high. It's so easy to settle in dating, especially I'm 25, my friends are getting married, they're talking about having kids. It's so easy to be like, well, I'll settle for Joey over there who, you know, smells bad, he doesn't have a job. Right. Yeah, fuck no. Yeah. Like, it's easy to settle for that, but I know that there's a person out there that's just so great and so incredible that will match me so well. It's worth not settling for that person.
I love that you brought that up. I was going to bring that point up because you recently did this video that you're like, the point of the series is not to find a boyfriend. It's to find someone who aligns with these values that eventually could become that person. But I don't want to have this settling factor of just at the end of 50 dates, I have a boyfriend, but then everyone's in the comments. Not that it matters what people think, but damn, this guy sucks. Like he was so rude to you the whole time, whatever that may look like. Can you name a time, and it doesn't have to be during this series, but at any point of your life that you have settled in relation to dating? I think it's very easy to speak about settling and saying how, especially to your friends, right? It's always easy to tell other people advice. And then when you're in a situation, it's harder to take it sometimes. And I think most people in their lives, especially women in dating, because it is hard out here, have probably settled once for someone, even if it's someone who is a good guy, but maybe he's not matching a lot of core values in your life, or maybe going back to, you know, for you, you said, something really important to me is extroversion. Like I want someone who is maybe not the loudest person in the room, but they do have their friend groups. They're still wanting to go out and see people because that's something that you know is a need for you. Can you name a time where you have settled and you're like, shit, I'm just gonna let this happen?
Yeah, like most definitely. I feel a lot of people have in their life. You know, the pressures of wanting to get married, wanting to start your life with someone, or just have someone be there at like events at Thanksgiving. You know?
Like literally Thanksgiving.
Like cuffing season is upon us, man.
Girl, it's here.
Yeah, it's definitely here. Yeah. And there's been times even during the series where I'll be like 3, 4, 5 dates with a guy, and I've been like, man, like maybe it'd be good just to like have someone around. They don't totally like meet everything, or they don't meet like honestly these core things that I'm looking for. Yeah. And like I'll keep going out with him. There's been times I've even done that this year. And it's all, I'm slowly but surely learning like, oh no, I need to be confident in my standards and confident for what I'm looking for. Because I have met guys that have met those standards for sure. There's a handful of them. So I know there's someone out there that does for sure.
That can meet it all. I love that so much. My last question for you before we get into our episode topic for the day is, I just want to talk about your emotions from your first date of this series to now. Has it gotten easier over time going on these dates, filming with these guys too? Because they have to have like a certain level of security in themselves to put themselves out there as well. Are you the same level of nervous from your 39th date that you just did to your first date, or has it gotten easier over time? Practice makes perfect. What does that look like for you in terms of your own emotions too?
Yeah, I think it honestly depends on the guy that I'm going out with.
Okay.
If they're like a real cutie, or I'm like their friends like really hyping them up to me, I'm like, oh, like
I'm a little nervous for this one.
I'm getting nervous. And then there's other ones where I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna go and talk to this person. It's gonna be fine. Or you know, it just kind of depends on the guy, honestly. But I've definitely become so much more confident with dating, confident with my ability just to like talk to strangers.
Yes.
Confident in just like being myself on a first date and knowing what to talk about and how to connect with someone over a few common topics. Like some guys, we don't have anything in common, but there's still something we can always connect on. So I feel like I've gained so much confidence in that area for sure. It's way more comfortable now than it was on the very first date.
I love that advice. And guys, we're going to get into everything she just mentioned, from conversation starters to everything on a first date. I think that's a perfect segue for our episode today. Today, we are talking about preparing for a first date. A lot of people get very anxious and nervous before a first date, including myself. They don't know what to wear. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to act. And they try to go into these dates trying to impress this person instead of just seeing if this is someone that is aligning with where they're at. And also having them impress you a little bit. So this person wrote in and they said, I feel a lot of anxiety when it comes to going on first dates with new people. It doesn't matter if we met through dating apps or in person. Whenever I get asked out, I tend to back out at the last minute because I start freaking out. I worry I'll be awkward or that they won't like me. How can I better prepare for first dates and manage my anxiety? I'm ready for a relationship, but I need help getting past the awkwardness of those first encounters. I love this. I relate to this so much because me at 27 still gets so anxious before first dates as well. I want to first just get into your dating history before even starting this series. What was the first date you ever went on in your life? Talk us through the nerves, the emotions. Talk us through what you wore. Like, I want to hear all the details of a first date because I think most people, even if they were really young when they went on it, can always remember that first date that they've been on, really.
I was a late bloomer. You want to know when my first date was?
Yeah.
First like real date. You know, there was like breakfast, but I feel like that doesn't count. breakfast with like guy friend, you know, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
That doesn't count. First like real date where it was like,
wait, where was the breakfast?
Chick-fil-A. That doesn't count. It does not count as a date.
I was like, a bougie brunch could be nice, but
no.
Okay, I don't know if the Chick-fil-A
a Chick-fil-A
necessarily
biscuit,
counts.
That's not a first date. No, my first like real date, I was 19.
Okay.
And the guy asked me out. He turned out to be my boyfriend in college.
Okay.
But he asked me out and he was very clear. And so that's how I knew it was a date. He said, we're going on a date.
Okay.
I'm interested in you. And I was like, okay.
No questions asked in my head.
Yeah. So I was 19. So I was late. So I remember it.
Yes.
But first date, we went to this Mexican restaurant. I lived in the middle of nowhere in South Carolina.
Okay.
This boy picked me up in his truck. And I hopped in. He was playing country music.
Oh, here we go. One hand on the wheel.
Yep, it was one hand on the wheel, the other on my heart, you know. It's good old country date.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
He picks me up. We take the dirt road over.
Really? Were you
Not
guys
actually a dirt
I was
road.
like, wow. Y'all were really in like the rural areas.
I think there was a gravel road, though.
Okay. Little off-road at some point. Yeah.
We went to like a Mexican restaurant.
Cute.
And we just got some food. It was his favorite Mexican restaurant in this small town that I hadn't lived in very long.
Okay.
And he knew every person in that Mexican restaurant.
Like all the waiters,
every
everybody.
single person.
I kind of love that.
I know. I was kind of like, ooh, wait, this is great.
He knew what he was doing though, because they're like, Billy, and he's like, oh. It's like the, you know, the hometown hero vibe.
Right,
for sure.
And I loved it because I got introduced to everybody.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh yes. Hi. But I played college softball, and so I was in this honestly like treacherous phase in my life.
Yeah.
Where I was working out all the time.
Okay.
I was like, I didn't know how to dress because I was like ripped.
Yeah.
And I feel like my hair always looked bad because it was always in a ponytail. Yeah. So I was looking bad on this first date. I was wearing like these tight skinny jeans and like this jersey fit shirt. I looked so bad. I can't believe
circa like 2000. What is this? 14?
No, 2018. Oh. I know. Don't age me that much.
I'm aging myself then.
Yeah, so we went to this Mexican restaurant, and that's what I was wearing. And it was great. And I remember being so nervous. I wouldn't look up from the menu, and I was like, oh, I'm so nervous. Because I really liked him, because we kind of had a friendship before that.
Got it.
And eventually he stuck with it. And
You finally
Even
locked
through
him down.
my terrible outfit and hair everywhere, he stuck through it.
Oh my gosh, that is the cutest thing ever. And like the nerves is something that everybody can relate to. Are you someone that, because you guys said you were friends first, do you like to have that friendship every single time you're dating someone before building into a romantic relationship? Are you open to just meeting someone, starting with more of a romantic kind of physical connection? Or are you someone that's like, building that friendship foundation is important? My preference is to start with that before I even go on a first date with somebody.
Yeah, I think my preference is that, but I'm open to the other way with a more romantic date for the first time meeting. I'm totally open to that.
Okay.
But I think for me personally, it's best when we're friends beforehand because you kind of build that like tension. You kind of build like a crush, you know?
Yes.
I feel like that's kind of a little bit better way that I prefer to do it.
Building the tension is like the best thing ever. And it is the best when you're with a friend too. When you went into this first date, it's so easy for people on first dates to ask themselves like, okay, I hope they like me. I want them to like me. But I mean, as women, we really should be asking like, am I even going to like this person? Let's talk about the importance of really asking ourselves, like, do we like that person? Instead of asking them like, are they going to like me? And you changing your personality or your viewpoints or whatever to adhere to this person that you're going out with and what they enjoy and like. The importance of staying true to yourself on a first date and really seeing if that person is someone that you can see in your life rather than you being someone that you can see in their life, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, 100%. You don't want to like change your personality for this other person because then you're going to be dating for 8 months and they're going to look over and you're going to be like, I'm not myself. Like, who am I?
Yeah.
And you want someone to actually like you for you, not for this made up person that you created.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is super important to ask yourself the question, do I like this guy too?
Yes.
And it's so easy to like flip it to make yourself think like, oh, I do like him and make up this whole like, 10 years down the road, I'm going to have his last name and I'm going to have his kids, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to make that up.
Yes.
But it's so important not to get ahead of yourself and start thinking those things too far and just be yourself and just kind of let it naturally happen.
Let it flow. Have you done that before? I mean, I have to be honest. I'm exposing myself. Like I am someone before a first date to this day. I will start putting the last name. Not saying I'm typing it into my phone or anything, changing my contact information, but I'll start envisioning some things in the future and then have gotten myself into trouble because I'll be on a first date with someone and I'm sitting across the table from them like, I don't like this person. Not in a bad way, but we're just not compatible. We have very different viewpoints of the world. I remember I went on this date with this doctor who was so cute. And so started envisioning, what will our kids look like? Then we got on the date and I was like, we have literally nothing in common. He hated social media. I'm like, that's literally probably the biggest part of my life with what I do too. Yeah. Have you ever been someone to start envisioning the future and kind of moving into that anxious tendency to cope in that way before a first date? Or have you ever always allowed yourself to be level set and level headed when it comes to that?
Most definitely. I've definitely got ahead of myself before.
It's hard
I feel like
not
every
to.
girl does. It's part of it.
Yes.
It's so hard not to.
Yeah.
As I've gone on more dates and like have been like, oh, each of these guys is just like a person.
Yeah.
Like, they're not this crazy Prince Charming that's gonna save the day. They're just a guy that I'm meeting. And I feel like that helps take the pressure off the first date too, is when you're like, this is just a person. I'm getting to know them.
Yeah.
Think of it just like getting to know a friend on a first date. Anything past that, you can lean more into romanticness. But it's important just to be like, this is a guy that I'm getting to know that's sitting across from me. I feel like that takes a lot of the pressure off.
Yes. Taking the pressure off, I think, is such good advice. You put so much pressure on yourself for something that may not even be meant for you, and taking that off and asking yourself, do I even enjoy myself? Like, as a friend with this person, I think that's so great. A part of that first date anxiety too, have you ever done the social media stalking beforehand and gotten yourself in trouble? Because I think there's two ways of that. You can either stalk them on social media and they look amazing and cool and they're traveling and you're again envisioning your future, or the opposite side of it. Maybe their social media, they look a little dorky or newbie, or maybe they have some interests that you are not necessarily aligned with in your life, but then when they explain it in real life, it's amazing, but you didn't even give them a chance because you've already built up this persona of who they are as a person. Have you ever done one or the other in terms of social media before a date, and has that gotten you in trouble on an actual date?
Yeah, most definitely. I feel like I've looked at I look at everybody's profile before going on a date.
Yes.
One, because like the nature of what I'm doing, I definitely compare mutuals because I'm like, I don't know this guy. I want to make sure he's like safe and good.
100%.
And I DM those mutuals for sure.
Yeah.
I stalk definitely a little bit because then I'll be like, oh, we have some conversation starters for sure. Or sometimes it's a little awkward on the date if you like bring up this thing and you're like, yeah, I remember when you went to Cabo 2016. I went
with
there
your mom
too.
and your sister Beatrice.
Right,
And yeah,
right,
it's just
right.
too much.
Way too much stalking. But
Yeah.
I've tried to be a little bit more aware of it. Recently, I went on a date with a guy that was on The Bachelor or
Yes,
Bachelorette
I saw
this
that.
past
I saw
season.
that. Yeah.
And I didn't watch the season when it came out, but when I knew I was going on a date with him, I purposely like didn't watch any clips or anything because I didn't want those like preconceived things about him to get in the way of like actually getting to know someone.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to be like, I'm scrolling back to 2014.
Which
it's good to some
100%.
degree. It's good to some degree because it allows you to realize like what we can talk about or common interests. But to like crazy 2012, beach trip to Cabo, maybe a little too far,
a little bit much. I might know these things and where your house is and everything, but I won't say anything about it too. I like the idea of using social media just to get some common interests to know where that is. And what are some other good conversation starters? Because I think for first dates, I'm a very deep conversationalist and I get ahead of myself sometimes. So I struggle with, I love banter. I love playfulness. I love lightheartedness. I need that in a relationship. But at the other side, I find myself on first dates, if it's only jokey and not getting anything about you, like how do you enjoy your job? Not saying like, what are your personal traumas? But just if you're not giving me anything that's a little past the surface, I find myself becoming a little more disinterested. And I know I need to give people more time to open up too. But how can people go between, if there's someone that enjoys the surface level conversation, but they want to get a little bit deeper without prying into this person's lives? What are some good conversation starters that you've even used on a first date yourself to kind of have a good mix of both?
Yeah, definitely. I love to talk about people's family and friends. I feel like that's a great conversation starter. I'll be like, what family member do you like love the most? Not actually, but which one do you like connect with the most? Which one do you like hang out with the most? I feel like that's an important one.
Yes.
Which one of your family members was like a role model?
Oh,
what do you like?
That
what do you like to do with your friends? I feel like those can be snuck in pretty lighthearted.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, like who are your friends? Where I love to ask like, are most of your buddies here, or are they like from college?
Yeah.
And it kind of like leads into kind of those deeper questions of like, oh, your friends mean a lot to you, that kind of stuff. And I love talking about friends and family.
Yeah.
I'm a big like talking about passions, talking about dreams.
Yes.
I'm definitely attracted to drive.
Oh, period,
and
girl.
Passion.
Where's that
Aren't we all?
motivation at?
Right.
Yes.
Like we gotta have some drive going for us. So I love
100%.
to be like, what motivates you in life? What are your biggest dreams? Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do with your life and why? Those are easy questions to phrase them obviously casualer than that. But those are great questions to really get to know like the root of someone.
Yes. The friends and family ones are really good because I think when people immediately think family, they have to get so deep with what's going on in their family, what's your relationship with your mom. But asking kind of those surface level questions that can grow deeper is a really, really good way to kind of go about that as well. And we're talking so much about good first dates and good questions for first dates. I want to hear about the worst date you've ever been on. I feel like everybody has one that you think back and you're like, I was there for 3 hours and I could have left within 45 minutes. And we'll talk about how a lot of women will lead into the people-pleasing ways of staying on a date longer than they actually need to. Yeah. Let's hear about the worst date, Liberty. I want to hear all the details. You don't have to give names or expose anybody. It can be someone outside of obviously your 50 date series too. But I want to hear about that date that you think and you're like, I would pay money to never have to go through that again. What did that look like for you?
Honestly, it was so funny. I would love to be a fly on the wall for this date. That was it's such a funny date looking back on it now, but it was definitely one of the, tough dates I've been on just because there was a lack of social awareness. Ooh. The date prior to this, I'll tell you the event that happened.
Okay.
But the events leading up to this were great. It was a great first date. Okay. We went to dinner. It was a vibe.
Love.
And this is outside the series, but we went to dinner. It was great. It was super fun. Vibes were there. But then there became less and less awareness of social cues.
No, that's like my ick. I can't.
Yeah. As I got like more into conversation, I was like, this is interesting. But I'm here for the plot. So
what were some of the social cue things that were happening? Was it like rude to waiters or saying things really loudly that's like, you're not supposed to say that? Like what was going on?
Well, the first cue was him saying, I saved for this date, and so get whatever you want. That was a little awkward.
Yeah, just like, you saved.
Like, I get it. You saved some money. So anyway, we get into this movie theater, basically.
Okay.
And so we're sitting there at this movie theater, and we're watching this movie. It was a gory movie,
Yeah.
first of all, and I could not pay attention because this man,
A gory movie for a date is
it was
crazy.
so gory. It was crazy. It was insane.
What was the movie?
I don't even know. I
You're
have
like,
no idea.
I disassociated from that event. I don't know, bro.
Right. I have no idea. I was like, huh? And gore doesn't bug me, but I was kind of like, this is crazy for a date. Like,
That's wild.
can we
for a
see like
date.
a rom-com or something, or like even like Inside Out, or
Like, so many options.
right.
Yeah.
But anyways, I had recently gone to the beach, so my scalp was a little dry.
Okay.
And I reached up and scratched my head like this.
Yeah.
And this man reaches over and starts scratching my head. Not even in like a cute way, where it's kind of like, oh,
No.
okay, yeah.
No.
So he reaches with one hand and starts scratching my head like this. His other hand enters my head like this, and he is scratching my hair,
Full
my head.
massage.
Yes, 2 hands during this movie.
You're
and
lying to me.
he's making eye contact with me too. He's like this, and I'm like,
Dude.
First of all, I don't even like my head being scratched.
Yeah.
Because I don't like how it sounds. I
Personal
don't know.
boundaries.
Yeah.
Like way over. Crazy.
Social cues were crossed. And
Way.
and I'm like, oh, you're good. You got it. And he
You got it. You got that one itchy
right,
spot from the
you're
beach.
good.
Yeah.
And he like reaches out of my hair and is kind of like, oh, I like my head being scratched. And I'm thinking, I'm not scratching this man's
Hell
head in this
no.
movie theater.
Hell no.
Yeah, no, it was incredibly uncomfortable.
I'm like, well, I like my head being scratched. Fuck you.
I'm like, I am
Asshole.
not scratching it. And then
Hard
like,
no.
yeah, and then we're like kind of like awkwardly sitting there for the rest of the movie. But it was definitely,
Dude.
obviously, I could have been in way worse first date situations, just with like the nature of what I'm doing and all
Yeah.
these dates and all these men. But this was like a lighthearted, like funny,
Yes.
kind of bad first date where it was like, what is happening right now?
That's pretty rough. I just don't. Yeah, the social cues were way off. To ever do that is weird, but especially during a movie where
It's
you're
gory.
not really supposed to be like looking at the person or touching, and there's gore, so it's like he's scratching your head and someone's getting like slaughtered on the screen. Like,
Right.
absolutely not. So in that situation, it's hard with the movie, obviously, because I kind of understand unless you're like in a very unsafe situation, like leave immediately if you can. But I get with the movie, it's like, okay, I kind of have to wait to the end of this movie.
Right.
How have you communicated, if you have before, if you're on a first date and it's just going very poorly, if that's someone's social cues are unaware, if you're just like not getting along with the person, if you're just not vibing, maybe you guys are bickering, arguing. I think a lot of women will, within that people pleasing mindset and just society of like pleasing a man, will stay for hours, especially if the guy's paying, because you feel bad in that
Right.
situation. I've done it before too. I went on this date with this guy for like 3.5 hours, and I'm not kidding. Within 30 minutes, I knew. I was like, this is not going to be a good date. We are not vibing. We have very different mindsets about things. We're just not compatible, genuinely not compatible. But I stayed for 3.5 hours because I felt bad because this guy was paying for my dinner. And then he's like, we should walk to this bar. I'll pay for your drinks. I'm like, well, I'll never say no to free beer, but also like my time is valuable. Have you ever been in a situation where you've stayed on a date longer than needed? And what would you want to say to women who don't necessarily need to do that, and communicating that, hey, I don't feel comfortable, or I don't feel like we're really vibing. Like, I had a great time. Thank you, but I think I'm going to leave now.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a difference between feeling uncomfortable and not vibing.
Yes.
Obviously, if you're uncomfortable, there's weird vibes happening, you feel unsafe.
Yeah.
Obviously, you should leave as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I am a little differing on the you're not connecting. How I feel on first dates, I think there's always something to get out of someone to talking to them. There's always a connection that can be made. And there's definitely been on dates where I have not connected with the guy, where I'm like, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
But they've turned out to be like, honestly, these delightful connections where either I've learned something about their job, I've learned something about who they are.
Yeah.
And I'm honestly not one to walk out on a date when we're not connecting, because there's always something a person can connect on.
I love that.
And if anything, you could like learn something about another person or inspire them, or talk about something that like you guys differ in beliefs on, but like maybe you can still conversate about that. If you're like bickering about, I don't know, if you're bickering about politics and you don't agree on things, you can still talk about that and like, you know, show that you like love other people and can connect with other people.
Yes.
But obviously unsafe, feeling uncomfortable, leave.
Yeah.
But I don't know, if you're not connecting, there's always something to connect with someone.
That's really good advice also. I think an extrovert or more outgoing person, and you seem very extroverted, obviously, and you're like very good with people. It's so easy for them to kind of go in the direction of like, okay, we're connecting. I know, can kind of come up with these conversation starters. What would you say to an introvert? Maybe someone who's a little more awkward, a little more shy, maybe someone who has a little more trouble starting those conversations and getting outside of their bubble, or maybe they feel really uncomfortable when it comes to even debating this little, not little, but like against politics. And okay, we have different views. That's huge.
Right.
Like, it may not work out if y'all are on opposite spectrums of things. But what would you say to someone who's a little more introverted that may struggle with that a little more than someone like us, who I feel like it's easier for us to start conversations even if we're not agreeing with someone?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm an extrovert, but the silliest thing I do before first dates is I will literally like plan questions in my head.
I like that. Yes.
And I'll admit to it. I know it's weird.
No,
but like I
you're
do
a planner.
it. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll like think of like 3 questions where I'm like, if it's awkward, I can ask about these things. Cause there's always going to be kind of an awkward pause.
Yes.
And that kind of gives me like a cushion of protection. Like if there is something awkward and it's like weird, I can just like pivot to these questions that I have in my head that I'm like curious about this person.
Yeah.
Another thing that I do that's funny to help take pressure off of the first dates. I mentioned I played softball. They would always teach us to like visualize your at bat. Like you'd visualize your hit, where it was going, and you'd visualize, getting to first base. I obviously not first base on a date, but or maybe, I don't know.
Shut up. Yes.
Maybe date 2
if you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky. But yeah, so I would visualize going on the date and like walking up to this guy and like we're gonna hug and it's like gonna be fine. And I feel like visualizing those first like 30 seconds of a date honestly helps like set me at ease and make me so much more comfortable. Like this is how it's gonna go and it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be okay.
Yes.
Those are my silly quirks of things I do before dates.
No, that's such good advice, especially the hug thing. I get so anxious, especially if I'm meeting someone off of like a dating app. I've only been probably on 3 or 4 dating app dates. Everyone else I've met through a friend in person. So the hug is something that I get so much anxiety about. Will I go in for a hug? Will they be awkward? Are they not a touchy person? So I like the advice of kind of planning a little before, having those like visualization techniques too. It really can help people relieve a lot of anxiety for what they're going through on a first date. What are some other reasons that you feel like most women especially will be very anxious before a first date? Do you think it stems back to just, again, kind of self-confidence? Like, I want them to like me. What if they don't like me? I know for me, I get most anxious about that because I'm like, I want them to enjoy their time with me too. I hope that I'm impressing them enough, even though we kind of talked about the harmful effects of going into a date like that. Why do you feel like most women especially face a lot of anxiety before dates, outside of course, the safety factors, especially when you're meeting a stranger off of the internet too? Right. That's like the biggest one probably.
I would say biggest one, safety, and then confidence. And then I think a big one is fear of rejection. I think it's scary putting yourself out there. It's scary to like put your heart on the line and be like, I'm going on this date. I'm going to do this kind of big, scary thing and meet a stranger. And that aspect is scary. And it's scary on the follow-up from the date where it's like you text and you're like, I had a good time.
Yes.
And like they could just shoot you down. Like it's so scary.
Actually, I don't see a romantic connection.
Oh my gosh, I've gotten that text. Yeah. We all have.
Oh yeah, girl. Oh yeah.
And it's awful. It's terrifying. But I feel like if we just lessen the load of it, you don't have to know whether this person is your husband. Yeah. You don't have to know whether this is the father of your children on this first date. Yeah. And that takes the pressure off of it for sure, and takes off that kind of like fear of them rejecting you after this first date. Whereas if we put that pressure of, this, I have to have this guy's last name, then it makes it feel so much heavier.
Oh yeah, because you plan out the whole wedding.
Right, exactly.
I see my dad walking me down the aisle, know what dress I'm getting. Like, it's gonna be painful. How can you tell the difference, you specifically, between nerves on a first date versus your intuition telling you before a first date, I don't think you should go out with this guy? Because it's very easy, I think, and you brought up a perfect example earlier of a really cute guy or his friends hyping up. Like, I'm going to be a little more nervous because I know he's going to be looking good. I know we vibe, whatever that looks like. Versus someone that maybe asks you out and they seem normal and nice, but there's just something in your body even saying like, I don't think you should go out with this person. Because I've definitely had intuitive feelings before dates, and I am a very intuitive person. I will say too that something's like not even crazy red flags, maybe some things that I'm like, I don't really like that, and you should pay attention to red flags even before a date too. But I have had situations where I'm like, something feels weird, like they're not doing anything bad, but something just feels weird, and it's not necessarily nerves, even though it feels like anxiety at the same time. And then I go on a date and something might happen, and I'm like, okay, maybe I should have trusted myself a little bit more in that situation. Has that ever happened to you where your intuition maybe was telling you, hey, not the person to be going out with for whatever reason? And how can people tell the difference between nervousness, anxiety versus like intuitively, I don't think that person is safe for you to go out with, or someone that you would even connect with, if that makes sense?
I think, yeah, I've definitely experienced that. There's definitely a difference between intuition though and like a gut unsafe kind of weird feeling. So there's like the nerve side of it.
Yeah.
And then there's like intuition, gut feeling.
Yeah.
Nerves are going to kind of like, you're going to be like, oh, he's cute. He's, you know, I'm
Yeah.
nervous. Like, ooh. It's like a little like jittery.
Yeah.
But I have this friend that always says, trust your gut 100%. It's
Yeah.
always right. And I think it always is. So if you have that like deep gut wrong feeling, you got to trust that. You have to trust your intuition
Yes.
on that date.
Yeah.
Because nerves, I think it's easy to differentiate. But if it's a deep wrong feeling, I'll tell you this, there was a guy that my aunt actually set me up with. And so I was like,
Okay,
oh, my
auntie.
aunt,
Yeah,
my aunt
thank
set me
you.
up. Yeah, yeah. And I was like, this is great. And she
Yeah.
like met them at like their local bar or
Yeah.
whatever. And I started texting with him, and I was very trusting because my aunt had set me up. I started texting. I started getting this kind of like weird gut feeling. And I was like, like I don't want to cancel on him.
Yeah.
Like he's like setting aside time. And like he, you know, the pressures of, oh, he's paying for the day. He's setting aside time. I do not want to cancel on him the day before. And I kept like getting weird feelings. And eventually I ended up canceling.
Yeah.
And I found out that he was still married.
Are you lying to me?
He was married.
How did you find out?
Through my aunt and through my cousin.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah.
And something just fell off to you.
Something fell off and weird.
Dude.
And I was like, I canceled on him the day before because I just felt weird. And I like said we had family plans or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Because I did sort of.
Period, yeah.
But I was going to make time for it.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I ended up canceling because I would never go out with a married man.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, incredibly terrible.
So glad you felt that in your body. I think that's so important. Like that, you said it perfectly, like that all-knowing feeling of something just feels weird. And usually that shit does come to light. Like you said,
does.
literally in that. I think a lot of women might feel that too if a man is suggesting a first date that they may not necessarily feel comfortable for. I'm someone that used to go on a lot of like drinks as a first date, but as I get older, I just don't like to do those as much because I would be low-key kind of drunk on these dates.
Yeah.
Which is so fun if you're vibing with someone. And this particular person, I would say I did feel safe enough to drink. But I think a lot of women, especially on a first date, if you're a lightweight, may not want to have multiple drinks with a complete stranger. How can someone communicate, hey, I am so glad that you're putting so much effort into this first date, but I don't feel super comfortable with going to drinks or going to this or whatever that looks like for that person. Have you ever had to do that? Have you ever had to shut down a first date idea? Because sometimes it does suck if a guy's really excited about it. But if you don't feel comfortable, you're going to be in your head the whole time with that. Have you ever had to change the plans a little bit around for a first date before?
Yeah, I think definitely. So I mentioned that I have this like scratch off date book.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I want to hear a little more about that too.
Yeah. So it has all these like fun, quirky, kind of like fun date ideas.
Okay.
Like going to a thrift store, dressing each other, like getting a 3-course meal, but like talking in accents the whole time, like funny stuff like that.
It. Yes.
But one of them was to get a kiddie pool and blow it up and go to a lake at night and like stargaze. And yeah, so but like I try to stay as true as I can to the book. And I had a mutual friend with this guy, and I had messaged him, his mutual friend, and was like, is this guy cool? Whatever. Because I didn't really know him. Yeah. And I didn't really know the mutual friend that well. So I was waiting for this like feedback from the friend, basically.
Need to know this.
Yeah. And so I'm on the date, and we scratch off the date, and we know that we're going to have to get a kiddie pool and go to a pond at night. Kind of unsafe, kind of weird with a man that you don't know. Yeah. Drinking wine in a kiddie pool in the middle of Atlanta in a lake. Kind of weird. Yeah. So before getting the feedback from the friend, from the mutual friend, I was like, let's go to a rooftop pool where I know my friends live. Love it. So I had to like pivot from like going into the woods by ourselves into a pond and like pivot to this kiddie pool in a pool. Yes. And turns out I got the text from the friend. Yeah. On our way to the rooftop pool, and I was like, oh, it's probably safe to go to the pond actually. But yeah, like I tried to like pivot this kind of really quirky idea into something where I knew I would be in like a safe environment. Yes. Because it's easy to get in those very unsafe scenarios, especially when you don't want to like change their plans, because guys are sweet and they want to plan stuff. You know.
Yeah, I think that's so important of still like allowing them to be in their masculine energy of still creating that plan and having a plan, but still obviously communicating to them that, hey, I don't feel super comfortable with this, but I probably would like any other idea you had. Let's do that too. So that physical safety is so important. And I want to talk about the emotional safety before going into a first date too. I think a lot of women, especially younger women, have a really hard time talking about their expectations with a guy going into a first date. So, hey, I'm looking to have fun. Hey, I'm looking just for a rebound. Like I just got out of a 7-year relationship. I'm not trying to date seriously, but a fun date and maybe a makeout would be really fun to me. Hey, I am super single and I'm really much looking forward to a serious relationship. I think a lot of girls though will hold off of that conversation on a first date specifically too for fear of not looking like the chill girl and looking clingy or crazy. Have you ever had to have a conversation on a first date of, hey, these are my expectations, and how do you like to go about that? I'm someone that I know what I'm looking for, but I do have anxiety of ever going into a first date and being like, this is what I'm looking for. If you're not looking for this, like cool. But also that would save me a lot of time because if someone's just there to hook up or do whatever, then we know that we don't ever have to go on a date again, and you're not spending money and I'm chill. So what's up?
Most definitely. That's great. I feel like it's so important to figure that out on a first date. And I feel like the biggest thing in dating is, I always say, communication is kindness in dating. 100%.
I love that.
It is. Like you got to just communicate where you stand and what you want.
Yes.
And I haven't really had it on a first date where like expectations are vastly different, because most of the guys that I've gone out with like are looking to date, or at least like not just these like crazy wild hookups. Like none of them have been like that, which is great. And that's not what I'm looking for either.
Okay.
But there's definitely been times like around like a third date where I've had to like communicate, or the guys had to communicate like, hey, I'm not like seeing this move forward, or I'm like, oh, I am seeing this move forward. I really like getting to know you. And I feel like there's been times that we've had to have those type of conversations more. So I feel like you can kind of relate that to on a first date, is just communicating about where you stand, what you're looking for. It's so important just to be like transparent, and honesty is just like the best thing you can do. And I mean, obviously don't be like brutally honest to this guy, right? Like,
you suck.
You know, like use your discretion. But like, it's so important just to be clear, and that's just so kind and the most important thing you can do.
I love that. Communication is kindness. And again, delivery is everything. I think I can definitely work on my delivery in a lot of ways sometimes, but I think that's such good advice too. I also love the idea of talking about financial safety or financial expectations. Are you someone that feels like, because I see this all over TikTok, do you think that whoever asks out the other person should be the one to pay, regardless of it's a first date, or if you're in a typical heterosexual relationship, we'll use for this example, that the guy should pay for the first date, regardless of the girl asks, regardless of everything? Because I've seen videos where the girl's like, well, I asked him, but I expected him to pay. And then the comments were like, but dude, you asked him. Like, you should have had a little money on that wallet then to be ready. And then some people are like, no, like the guy should always pay, whatever. What are your thoughts on that? I love hearing people's different opinions on this. It's like my favorite thing.
Yeah, it's such a like an important topic.
Yeah, I know.
Like it's so
Controversial,
polarizing.
yeah.
Woo, controversial podcast, everybody. I think the dates that I've been on, we just like communicate about it. We just talk about
Love it.
And I feel like there's been times where either I've paid for the full date, or there's been times that the guys paid for the full date, or there's been times where it's like, hey, you buy drinks, I'll buy ice cream, that kind of stuff. And I think it's just, I personally like splitting, because I'm kind of like, oh, I like paying for part of it to be like, I'm here too, to like show up.
I like that. I'm a part of this as well. Yeah.
But also like chivalry is not dead. So if the guy like wants to pay for it, I'm there for that too. Like that's totally fine. But just because of what I'm doing, and I'm asking a lot of these guys out, I will always offer to pay for the date, because like I am filming them and like, putting them on social media.
You're getting a lot out of them.
Right. But most of the times, a lot of the guys are like, oh, I will pay. But I like splitting personally. I think it's a good like, oh, we're like a team. Like I think it's a good like
partnership
setup for like a relationship. It's like we're both bringing something to the table, and I think it's just it's like a beautiful team, you know?
I love that. No, I love that so much. It's so interesting hearing everyone's different opinions, because my friends have very different opinions. My parents have they're very traditional, so they have very specific opinions about it. I think I grew up pretty traditional, so I always have an expectation of like, okay, at least first date, I always say I always like the guy to pay, and then I know that we're not all out here making six fucking figures. Like I'm not expecting you to pay for every single date that we go on. Can put up my work too, especially like as we're just dating, and you know, when people get into serious relationships, marriage, that looks differently for people. But like I've always say like first date, I love the guy to pay, and then afterwards, like we can figure it out after that. But I do love the idea of like, this is a partnership. This is 50-50. Like I want to show up to that as well. I think that's really good. In terms of clothing for your first dates, what do you typically go for? Are you someone that's like, okay, like, jeans and a sweater is going to work on most dates. It's going to work for dinner dates. It's going to work for an activity date, unless y'all are like hiking. Obviously, please do not wear jeans for the love of God. Do not do that, please. But do you have like a kind of a go-to that you do, or do you like to kind of switch it up just depending on what you're doing? Because I think a lot of girls get so nervous about, oh my gosh, like I don't even know what to wear. I have to go shopping. And it's like, no, something in your closet will definitely work. Men are also very simple in a lot of ways. They can't even tell if you bought something new versus not. They're not going to know the newest fashion trends. So what are your thoughts on like clothing for first dates and how people can kind of go about that too?
Yeah, I think so. Because of the first dates that I'm doing, I don't know what my first date is until I show up to the date, because I have these scratch off dates. So neither of us know what the date is.
Yeah.
So most my outfits are like the most versatile outfits you could wear. So it's usually like jeans and like some sort of sneaker or like boot, and then like a shirt that like I am not gonna like flash anybody in, or like a shirt that it's okay if it gets a little dirty. Yeah. So most things are pretty like versatile, where I could like get in a kiddie pool at midnight and stargaze. Okay. Or I could go to like a fairly like elevated dinner. Okay. So it's usually like a sweater and jeans, or like a nicer shirt that like it's okay if they get dirty. It's okay if they get a little messy.
That's a good go-to.
I feel like it's just good to be versatile. But there's been times for dates like I've worn a dress. I've worn like a very fancy dress.
Ooh.
You know? Yeah, I've done that.
Where were you going on that one?
We went and like rode a Ferris wheel, and then went to like a rooftop bar. Yeah, it was very cool.
That's like a bomb date.
Yeah, it was awesome.
That's a good date. Yeah. I love an activity date, honestly, more than probably a dinner date, especially with a first date. Like, or like watching each other eat. And if someone has really bad manners, you're just kind of like, oh my God, I can't get through this. But I love an activity, like let's go do something somewhere, and then we can grab a drink or like food after, but like let's do something.
Yeah, and it allows you to get to know the person so much better, because you know you're seeing them like problem solve or do this like fun thing. You get to see so much more of their character and who they are.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I feel like you can see so much of a personality with how they plan that first date, and like the effort and intention that goes into it too. If someone's like planning like a wonderful first date, and you can tell that they put a lot of thought into it. Not even a lot of money, but a lot of thought. Maybe they grab some groceries from the store. I got a blanket. You guys go to the park. That's like my dream day. I'm like, I just want to sit in a park when the weather's nice and like talk for hours. And like, that's all I want to do.
Yes, that's the best date ever.
Literally, that's all I want to do is yap and sit. Like, I love it. Last words of advice for this person, for this woman who's feeling anxious about going on a first date. What do you want to tell her? What do you want to say to her just to relieve some of that anxiety and not have so much nervousness around meeting new people, having conversations, and connecting with whoever they're interested in?
Yeah, I think everybody's anxious about first dates. They're scary. There's a lot of pressure on it. So know that it's okay to feel that way. Yes. It's totally fine. I still get nervous for first dates. It's scary, right? Yeah. You're putting yourself out there. You're meeting someone you don't know. You're going to do something maybe you're not used to doing, right? But I think like honestly treating it like you're just talking to a friend, you're meeting someone new is the simplest thing you can do. And just switching your mindset of it's not that deep. It's okay. Like take the pressure off. Yes. You don't have to know whether it's your spouse. And that helps relax the pressure a lot for sure. Yeah. And then I think also just like treat it casually. Talk to this guy. You know, you're just going to sit there with someone for 2 hours and get to know them. That's all it is.
That's all you need to know. That is perfect advice. Liberty, thank you so much for being here today. This was an awesome episode. I learned so much. I have so many skills going into my next first day. I'll keep you posted there. But please let the people know where you're at, where they can find you, where they can find your 50 Dates series. Let them know all of your social media, everywhere that you're at, so you can connect with them too.
Yeah, for sure. My Instagram and TikTok is the Liberty Schultz, and then I also have a podcast also called It's a Date, and I have my dates on, and we talk about dating. And I had some girls on, and we talk about dating and crazy first date stories. So it's a great podcast. It's super fun. So that's me on social media. Yes, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Guys, check her out, her podcast, all of her social media. You're going to have so much fun looking at all of her content too. But as always, if you want to get advice on any topic from any guest throughout the season, again, social media influencers, content creators, therapists, counselors, literally, I will have anybody that you need. Head to that Google form on my website, www.unlicenssedpodcast.com, or my Instagram or TikTok, @unlicenssedadvice, and we will get an answer for you. But I love you guys, and we'll see you next week.